So let's begin. Hey, my name's Andrew. I want to tell you about how I went from planning a wedding with a woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with to quietly calling my lawyer after she stormed out over what I thought was a pretty minor argument. And just 48 hours later, she was the one calling me, leaving messages, wanting to talk. But to really understand why I did what I did, and how it got to the point where legal action was even on the table, I have to take you back to the beginning. Back to when I first met Nicole. Because none of this will make sense unless you see where it all started. I met Nicole during a visit to North Carolina to see my family. It was just a routine visit to catch up with everyone. But a day before I met her, my mom and I were having coffee in the kitchen, and she looked at me and said, "When are you finally going to find a soulmate? You're pushing 35 and still single." We both laughed it off in the moment, but I won't lie to you. That question lingered in the back of my mind longer than I expected. Fast forward a couple of days, and I get invited to a casual meetup hosted by one of my close friends. That's where I met Nicole. We ended up on the same side of a few group discussions. We didn't agree on everything, but the way she presented her thoughts caught my attention. By the end of the evening, I knew I wanted to keep in touch, so I asked for her number. She gave it without hesitation, and that night I messaged her. I was just genuinely curious about her. To my surprise, she replied pretty quickly, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. It felt like talking to someone I had known for a while. The more I talked to Nicole, the more questions I had. I was just intrigued, and I wanted to know more. She told me she was an event planner based in Charlotte. She loved what she did, and from the way she talked about it, I could tell she was good at it. I explained that I was only in town to visit family. I lived and worked in Chicago full-time. Still, she didn't seem to mind the distance. We kept chatting. The next day turned into a few days, and by the time I flew back to Chicago, it felt strange not seeing her in person. But we didn't stop talking. In fact, the communication picked up. It became a daily thing. A few weeks later, I booked another trip to North Carolina. Not just to see family this time, but to spend time with her. That happened 2 more times. And every time I was there, we hung out more. We explored the city, grabbed dinner, went on walks, and just enjoyed each other's company. Before either of us said anything directly, it was clear that we were in love. So we began a long-distance relationship. At that time, I didn't mind the distance. I already traveled to North Carolina pretty often to visit my family anyway, and we found ways to make it work. My job was remote, which gave me some flexibility, but the company still had a policy that required us to come into the office at least once a week. So even though I worked from home most days, I couldn't just up and leave Chicago immediately. Still, we texted every day, called each other every night, and I made time to fly down to see her when I could. She came up a few times too, but most of the traveling was on me. That didn't bother me either. At the time, I saw it as investing in something real. But as the months passed, I started thinking about how long we could keep doing this back and forth. Long distance works in theory, but when you start feeling real feelings and imagining a future with someone, the space between you starts to feel wider. I began asking myself if this relationship was serious enough for one of us to make a move. And right around the time I was thinking that, Nicole brought it up herself. We'd been dating for a little over a year, and some months when she looked me dead in the eye on one of my visits and said, "If we're serious, someone has to relocate." It was one of those moments where you know the relationship is hitting a new level. It just sounded like a practical step. And in my mind, I already knew it had to be me. Her business, her career, her connections were all in Charlotte. So I decided to move. To make it work, I had to forfeit part of the annual bonus my company offered, because switching to full remote meant I wouldn't meet their weekly in-person requirement anymore. That money would have been nice, sure, but I believed I was choosing something more valuable, a future with the woman I loved. Leaving Chicago wasn't easy. I had a whole network of friends and colleagues out there, people I'd grown close to over the years. It was a city I'd called home for a long time, but I packed up and relocated to Charlotte. Nicole was thrilled. At the time, seeing her happy made me feel like I'd made the right decision. I had no idea what the future really held, but in that moment, I believed I was doing the right thing for us. 6 months after I relocated to Charlotte to be with Nicole, I proposed. At that point, I really believed she was the one. I figured if I'd given up that much without any regret, then I might as well take the next step, and it felt like the right time. I didn't want to just hand her a basic ring off some shelf. I wanted it to be something meaningful. I worked with a custom jeweler who came highly recommended by a friend of mine. I took weeks looking through stone types, settings, and styles until I landed on a design that I felt matched Nicole's personality. Elegant, but not loud. Delicate, but still unique. The ring alone cost me just over $12,000, not even counting the time, effort, and emotion that went into it. I proposed to her on a quiet evening after dinner. I told her how much she meant to me, how I saw my future with her, and how moving across states hadn't felt like a loss, because I felt I'd gained something more important. Her. She started crying. Then she said yes. At that moment, everything felt worth it. So once we got engaged, Nicole immediately said she wanted to handle the wedding planning herself. She was firm about it, even laughed, saying, "This is my realm, babe. I've got this." And to be fair, she is an event planner, so I figured, why not? It's literally her job. I trusted her, and more importantly, I wanted her to feel like she had the freedom to make the day exactly how she dreamed it. She didn't waste time. Within the first week, she'd already made calls and started locking in vendors. She hired a caterer, a florist, a photographer, and booked the venue. All people she already knew from her work. These weren't random businesses. They were her friends and industry contacts. It felt more like a reunion than a selection process. She didn't ask me for input. And, to be honest, I didn't push. I wanted her to feel empowered. But something that made me pause a little, though I didn't act on it, was how most of the deals she made were verbal. There were barely any proper contracts. Just emails and text messages. No structured agreements, no firm cancellation policies, and no official paperwork in some cases. It didn't sit right with me, but again, I assumed she knew what she was doing. This was her world. Every time a new vendor came on board, there was a deposit to pay. Bit by bit, I paid for everything, no questions asked. By the time we were halfway through planning, I had shelled out close to $30,000. Not once did she offer to split the cost or suggest we make decisions together. It was just kind of expected that I'd cover it. And I did. My family noticed. My mom especially. She pulled me aside during one of our visits and asked, "Shouldn't these be joint decisions? It's your wedding too." She was looking out for me. I shrugged it off and told her, she's just passionate. This is her field. I didn't want to make it a big deal. I thought I was doing the right thing by trusting Nicole and staying out of the way. But looking back, maybe that was my first real mistake. So, as we prepared for the wedding, she moved in with me. And I'll be honest with you. At first, I thought this was the next natural step. I thought we knew each other pretty well. But let me tell you, there's a big difference between visiting someone and actually living with them day in, day out. Once we started sharing the same space, a bunch of little things began to pop up. Stuff that would have never come up when we were apart. It's like all the distance had hidden some of the rough edges. Suddenly, I was learning more about her habits, how she handled stress, how she reacted when things didn't go her way, and not all of it was easy to swallow. The little disagreements started piling up, and it added tension to what was supposed to be an exciting time for us. One of the biggest fights we had was about the wedding guest list. Now keep in mind, my family is super important to me. Even though we're spread out across different states, we always make the effort to show up for each other. A few of my aunties had already told me they were traveling long distances just to be there on my big day. Some of them were elderly. Some of them had never flown before. And they were doing all this just to support me. But when Nicole started finalizing the guest list, I noticed their names weren't on it. At first, I thought it was a mistake. So, I asked her about it. She just said, "I want my wedding to be small. It's my dream." That one sentence lit a fire in me. I was confused and honestly hurt. I tried to explain that they had traveled far, that they were excited, and that it meant a lot to me. But she didn't budge. In fact, instead of hearing me out, she turned it back on me and said something that really stung. "You never support my vision." I couldn't believe she was saying that. I gave up a lot so we could be together, and now I'm the one not being supportive? That was the first time I realized we weren't on the same page. And this time, I didn't back down. I told her clearly, I wasn't compromising on this. My family mattered, and I wasn't going to let them be excluded. This wasn't just her wedding, it was ours. And it needed to reflect both of us, not just her. From that moment, things started shifting. 1 week before what should have been the final venue walkthrough, Nicole and I hit a wall we couldn't climb back over. Things had been building up, sure, but I didn't expect everything to explode the way it did. That evening, we were going over the final payments and logistics. I had transferred a lot of money to her over the months, but the numbers didn't quite add up. I asked her if she could walk me through where the money actually went. I just asked for clarity, for transparency. I thought any couple about to get married should be able to talk through finances without it turning into a war. But she didn't take it that way. Her whole face changed. She went quiet for a moment, then slammed her hand on the table. "You know what? Wedding's off," she shouted. "I'm not marrying someone who doubts me." And just like that, she grabbed her keys, stormed out of the house, and left me standing there, stunned. At first, I didn't believe her. I thought she just needed to cool off. I mean, who cancels a wedding over one argument? I sat in silence that night, thinking she'd come home, that we'd talk it out like adults. I waited. I called. I texted. No response. The next day, she showed up around noon. She walked straight in like a stranger packing up after a hotel stay. She didn't even look me in the eye. I asked her calmly if we could talk. I still cared, and I was still hoping we could figure this out. But then I noticed something. She wasn't wearing the engagement ring. So I asked, "Nicole, why aren't you wearing the ring?" She zipped up her bag and said flatly, "We're done, and I'm keeping the ring." When she was done packing her things, she walked out and didn't even look back. That moment right there, that's when I knew. This wasn't a rough patch. And from that point on, my response had to change. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer back in Chicago. I told him everything. After hearing all of it, my lawyer took a deep breath and said, "You're not powerless here." Then he referred me to a colleague of his based in North Carolina, someone who was more familiar with state-specific laws. I called that lawyer the same day. I explained the entire story again. And that's when he told me, with something I didn't expect, North Carolina still recognizes something called breach of promise to marry. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but the way he broke it down made sense. He laid out 3 main legal angles we could pursue. First, the engagement ring. In North Carolina, an engagement ring is considered a conditional gift, meaning if the marriage doesn't happen, the ring should legally be returned to the person who gave it. Second, the breach of promise to marry itself. That basically meant I could sue for both emotional and financial damages since I had materially changed my life, moved states, left my social network, altered my career setup, based on the expectation that we were getting married. And third, unjust enrichment. That one hit hard. He explained how Nicole had benefited financially from my funding a wedding entirely coordinated by our close friends and business partners. Almost 50 grand of my money went into contracts that, if we're being honest, were more handshake deals than written agreements, because I trusted her. Hearing all this made me realize I didn't have to just sit back and ask nicely for the ring. I could take real action. So I gave him the green light to move forward. The very next day, we filed the suit. We went all in. We demanded the return of the $12,000 engagement ring. We sought $48,000 in damages for all the wedding-related costs that I'd covered. On top of that, we added claims for relocation damages, arguing that I gave up future earnings and uprooted my entire life by moving from Chicago to Charlotte under the promise of marriage. The moment she got served, she panicked. She sent me a text that just said, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. A couple of minutes later, my phone started blowing up. She called 6 times back to back. I didn't pick up. Then came the voicemails, one after the other. Some of them sounded like she was crying. In a few, she begged me to drop the lawsuits. Said it was all just a misunderstanding. Said we didn't have to go this far. That we could settle it privately. But here's the thing. If she wanted me to drop the lawsuit, she had to pay me back every dollar I was demanding. I told her that clearly. She refused. Said I was being petty, that I was ruining her life. But in my head, I just kept thinking, you ruined mine first. So the case moved forward. The court process dragged on for months. It was a lot of back and forth, statements, financial records, calls with my lawyer, and mediation attempts that went nowhere. She tried to make it seem like I was the unreasonable one. But the evidence spoke for itself. My lawyer was sharp, he brought the facts. And finally, the court ruled in my favor. They ordered Nicole to return the engagement ring. I got partial reimbursement for all the wedding-related expenses I covered. And the court awarded additional damages specifically for breach of promise, acknowledging that my move across state lines came with real losses, both personal and professional. After everything that happened, I thought I'd feel some kind of relief once the judgment came through. And to be honest, part of me did. But things didn't just end there. You see, court judgments become public record. And in Nicole's case, that mattered a lot. She's an event planner in Charlotte. Her entire business runs on reputation, trust, and referrals. Brides and their families don't want drama. They want someone they can count on. And when word got around that she was taken to court by her own fiancé for mismanaging wedding funds and breaking off an engagement under shady circumstances, it didn't look good for her. And to make things worse, she didn't keep up with the court-ordered payments. Every deadline passed with her paying some and skipping others. She did return the ring, though. But my lawyer had already prepared for her not paying. As soon as she defaulted, he filed a lien against her business assets. That meant if she ever sold or tried to profit from her company, I had a legal claim to a portion of it. The pressure piled up. Debts, bad reviews, lost income. Eventually, she filed for bankruptcy. And look, I'm not going to sit here and gloat about someone's life falling apart. Did I get all my money back? No. Not even close. But the point wasn't just about money anymore. It was about accountability. And on that front, she didn't walk away untouched. She faced the music. And for me, that was enough. Anyway, that's my story. And I'm curious, what do you think? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have gone the legal route like I did? Or would you have just let it go? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking with me. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe for more stories like this one. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.